So I think Land Rover is on the cusp of an exciting new, quite radical change in direction. And in this video, I'm going to explain how we got here and where I think that direction might be taking us. So over the years, Jaguar Land Rover, parent company of Land Rover, which I'm going to focus on in this video, has had a number of CEOs. But the person really steering that company, its direction, its ethos, its principles, has been design chief Gerry McGovern. And Gerry McGovern has now left the company just as a new CEO arrives. And Gerry has not just walked out of his own accord, he has been ousted, escorted from the building, according to reports, not of his own accord. To me, this indicates only one thing, that the current direction of Land Rover, as espoused by McGovern, is about to change, and a new CEO needed McGovern out of the way to make that change. And what might that change be? Well, let's first start off with what Land Rover is at the moment. And at the moment, it espouses something called modern luxury. What is modern luxury? Well, according to some of their own words, well, modern luxury is things like a tranquil sanctuary. It is breathtaking modernity, peerless refinement, unmatched capability. To me, those are big marketing claims without too much in the way of capability to actually back them up. But that's what it is. What it means is that Land Rover are producing luxury vehicles, fairly full-featured, and they're attempting to play in that high-end market occupied by the likes of Audi, BMW, Mercedes, Lexus and Porsche. That's where and what Land Rover is at the moment, and it's a direction which has upset the traditionalists, and to some extent that's okay, because a company has to survive, it has to return money to its shareholders. You can't ever just hang on to one direction which is no longer relevant. You've got to use that horrible marketing word to reimagine yourself. And Porsche did it, for example. They brought in the Cayenne and people were howling about that, but that saved the company, and the Macan later was a success as well. So change does happen, but it's got to be change in a direction which makes sense and actually works. And I don't think the changes with Land Rover are working particularly well at this point. And I believe that's why McGovern was let go. Now, the name Land Rover itself has been increasingly downplayed. Why? Because Land Rover evokes images like series vehicles and oldness and camel trophy and hard off-road and middle-aged men and things like that. That's not what Land Rover wants to be. They want young, sleek, high-flying executives. They want luxury resorts. They want skiing. They want high-performance mountain biking. That's the world that they want now, and the old Land Rover badge represented none of that. And that's why I think it's been downplayed. Ironically, they say that the Land Rover badge is now a trust mark, which is ironic because the one thing Land Rover had a negative on was reliability. Nobody ever questioned the capability of a Land Rover. Everyone agreed they were great off-road, great towing, charismatic vehicles. But the one negative was the reliability, and yet that is the thing which they're claiming is now going to act as a trust mark. And they also claimed that the Land Rover brand had less recognition than things like Defender and Discovery. Well, and that was the case, why in the USA was the Discovery model called the LR3, LR4, and the Freelander was called the LR2. So I really don't see that. It's really just understanding that the Land Rover brand is not what they wanted to be associated with, so they downplayed it. Fair enough, sometimes you've got to do what you've got to do to survive in the corporate world. I think it was the wrong call from a corporate perspective, but we'll see. Land Rover's now fighting Audi, BMW, Mercedes, Porsche and Lexus. With what? Lexus is known for reliability, being boring but super good service, hyper reliable. I've reviewed Lexuses and that's what I've said, and I firmly believe that's what the brand is good at and what it stands for. Porsche, high performance, we all know that. Not just a 911, but baked into every Porsche is high performance. BMW, driving dynamics, they care about that, they focus on it. And Audi, well, I'm not entirely sure about Audi, but I guess it's a combination of all of those. They're all well-established brands there. So what do Land Rover bring to that? Well, they're not bringing reliability, they're not bringing performance. What are they bringing? Hard to say. The one tool they've got is off-road capability, towing, practicality, that market, and yet they're downplaying that. They make brilliant tow vehicles, but they're just not pushing that. So why are they wading into a market with the premium German competitors and not using the one tool that they've got? It makes no sense to me. Here's my idea, and this could be where it's going, maybe not. I'm interested in your views. Ditch modern luxury and change it to adventure luxury. Similar, but now you can fight with the tools you've got. You've got that Land Rover heritage, you've got that brand recognition for off-road. And I don't mean hardcore off-road, I don't even mean Ineos Grenadier type of off-road or Jeep Wrangler. I mean daily practical stuff. A really good example of that is Jeremy Clarkson on Clarkson's farm with his Range Rover. He doesn't take his Range Rover rock hopping. He uses it day in, day out on his farm and as a luxury vehicle. He chucks hay bales in the back, he tows, he goes through muddy paddocks in it. That's the sort of stuff I'm talking about. So yeah, you can take your, if you want to do a lap of Australia in some style and capability, you buy yourself a Defender. That's what people need to be saying to themselves. If you are wanting to do a really good job of towing your horse float or your boat, or you want a vehicle to support your abseiling hobby, or you're a glider pilot and you want to tow stuff around there, or you're a scoutmaster and you want an upmarket vehicle which can do the day-to-day practical job of all of this stuff, or you own a nursery and you want to chuck plants in the back, or tow a trailer full of plants and potentially drag that across a muddy paddock, or you own a beach house and you want to make sure that the vehicle you've got there can go for a run along the beach, whatever point, or into the outback if that's so, then you want to be looking at a Land Rover product for that. When you've got the money to buy a better, classier vehicle, more upmarket, and yet it can still do all of these things. It doesn't have to have the payload of a Ranger Super Duty. It doesn't need to be utilitarian. It can and should be luxurious, but at the same time, super practical, even for people who don't go off-road. But when you do, you can always rely on the Land Rover. I think the slogan could be, that's a Land Rover job. Oh, you've got a heavy trailer you need to tow into the middle of a paddock for an event and it's a bit muddy, that's a Land Rover job. Oh, you want to go for a run along the beach, better take the Land Rover. You want to put 4 or 5 people in a vehicle full of gear and go off and enjoy your mountain bike hobby because you're going to put stuff on the roof and load it up, that's a Land Rover job. And you just use the Land Rover in so many practical ways, and you focus on that. You don't worry about fragrances or bits about weird or wonderful bits of design. It's all practical focused. And then I think people would buy it. If you try and appeal to everybody, you appeal to nobody. That's a maxim I didn't make up. It's a maxim of politicians and it's a maxim of YouTubers. I think I do an exceptionally good job of not appealing to everybody, even if I do say so myself. And the same with Land Rover. Don't try and appeal to the Audi buyers or the Porsche buyers. Appeal to the people who are not represented, who are not catered for, the people who want a capable, luxurious, high-end vehicle which supports a practical hobby or business. So you've got to justify the premium. At the moment, Land Rover are trying to justify the premium based on slogans like Tranquil Sanctuary or whatever it was. That is not how you build a brand. It's never been how you build a brand ever. The Land Rover brand was built on capability. It was built on things like the Camel Trophy. It was built on farmers. It was built on emergency services. It was built on people driving Land Rovers around the world. That's what made it great. And the motorsport brands are built on victories in Formula One and Le Mans and other sports car things there. And the day-to-day use of the cars on tracks, the Porsche clubs, the other clubs who just take that brand to the next level, and people see that and then it reflects all the way through. And that's what Land Rover needs to do. You're not going to build a brand on slogans. You're going to build a brand on capability and brand advocates using it. You want to make people proud to wear your Land Rover cap. You want to give people memories like this model of a Discovery 4. It's actually my father's Discovery 4, and that model was made when we were driving it through Morocco. And this picture was painted for me by a friend. It's some of my old Discovery 3 when we were touring in Tasmania. And those are memories I've got of a Land Rover, and to me that starts to build a Land Rover ethos and brand, and that's how you get brand value, not by coming up with meaningless slogans. And this photograph here, that was from a Range Rover Sport test. I was so impressed with that car on road and off road, and just amazing, and it remained a hero car of mine for many years, and it is just a fantastic vehicle. And the fact I've chosen to make a poster out of this from the press test tells you something about how impressed I was with it. But these days it wouldn't be as impressive. I just don't feel the need to do that with any of the modern cars. And again, you're not building your brand, you're not building that value. And the interesting thing is that Land Rover has built that brand, and it started to spend that capital with Range Rover, certainly. So the Range Rover itself was built on luxury and hyper capability and refinement on road, and it was the best at that. It was the benchmark for many years, and still is. And then they started to dilute it a little bit with the Range Rover Sport, which I think is a fine vehicle, but I still think it embodies the Range Rover values. But then along came the Evoque, which was not embodying those values, but it was diluting that, spending that Range Rover capital. And then along came the Velar, which is the ultimate rolling answer to a question nobody ever asked, but it's just a way to squeeze that Range Rover brand just a little bit more. But you can only do that for so long until there is no more brand value left. And I don't think the Range Rover name means what it does 20 years ago, when you saw a Range Rover and wow, that was something else. Now a Range Rover could be Evoque. It's not the same. So what do you think? Where should Land Rover go from now? Do you think that we should move ahead with adventure luxury, keep with modern luxury, do something else? Why do you think Gerry McGovern had to leave so suddenly? Please tell me in the comments.